Harper Lee is a legend in her own right, writing a hard-hitting novel about the life in the south of North America during the 1930s, written from the perspective of a 6-year-old girl who lives with her brother and father. It was released in the 1960s, but 50 years later, the story and its message is still carried around by its readers. We were lucky enough to be able to discuss To Kill A Mockingbird with Harper Lee and ask the questions everyone has always wanted to know.
You are infamous for not talking to the media, so the general public knows so little about you. But I feel the readers of To Kill a Mockingbird know more about you than they realise, because the book has been described by academics as an exaggerated autobiography by Harper Lee. It feels like you and Scout share a lot of characteristics when you were growing up. So what influenced and inspired you to write this phenomenal story from a 6-year-old girl's perspective?
When I handed in my first draft for Ghost Had a Watchman to my publisher, the idea was rejected, but to write from a younger perspective, the majority of the book was offered up. Looking back now, I feel like that was the most suitable option. For the majority of the book, Scout is an adolescent telling the stories of her hometown, and because I could relate to a young girl in the 1930s, I could give more naive and innocent views on the world. I understood how someone of that age could think and act in a certain way. So I guess I just understood the perspective of a 6-year-old girl, and that made it easier to write about.
In this book, you deal with many themes, some obvious, but also subtle themes. The more obvious themes are curiosity and misconception of Boo Radley, and the quite prominent theme of racism. But I believe the theme of mental and physical abuse is always there, whether it is between the words or spoken out loud. Did you make a conscious effort to include this sort of material?
It was a completely unconscious effort, and I think that it was included in the story because both mental and physical abuse was a lot more prominent in the 1930s. Parents would hit their children if they misbehaved, and that was accepted by society, even encouraged. So it's a much of a stretch to presume that society would accept other forms of abuse. Helen Robinson experienced verbal abuse from Bob Ewell even after her husband was locked up for a crime he didn't commit. Mr. Radley, Boo's father, is known to abuse his son. Whether physically or mentally, it doesn't matter, because it still has the same effect. So to answer your question, no, it wasn't a conscious effort, but a theme, as you put it, which had a definitive place in the narrative.
Atticus' character is one of a kind. He is caring, loyal, and a great role model. But throughout the book, no massive character development is seen. Why?
Atticus has been through a lot in his life, seeing the injustice happen throughout the world through being a lawyer. He's a unique character because of his ability to see the good in people while forgiving the bad, which is so rare for a male in the deep south of North America in that time period. I kept Atticus as a constant character throughout the course of the book because he'd done his growing up. He was old enough that he needed to continue to mature, but to continue to act his age.
What's the most important thing a reader should take from the development of Scout's relationship with Boo Radley?
Character has a lot of development in the book through learning about the harsh truths of society. At first, she formed an opinion of Boo Radley simply through the rumours spread throughout her town. Throughout the story, you can see subtle changes of her attitude towards Boo, as she slowly understands Boo and she tries to see the world from his point of view. I want readers to try and understand others and give people a chance before they judge them. Like Atticus said, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside his skin and walk around in it. I think most people are too quick to judge. One of my favourite quotes in the book is, "People generally see what they look for and hear what they listen for," which I believe is very true.
You build up suspense in the novel from the very start by foreshadowing about how dangerous Boo Radley is, or for so long this court case was so mysterious. So little was known about what was going to happen. Could you elaborate your aim with the suspense written in the book?
Part 1. The story creates a background of Boo Radley without giving any actual facts on him. He's a character known only through rumours, so the idea of the children finally finding out for themselves what this character is like is really exciting. The court case was a big mystery for Scout. She had no idea what was happening, yet she still stood up for her father and her family. I've actually had someone describe it as a wall with cracks slightly seeping through, little tidbits of information, and this keeps someone continuously flipping the page.
Through I have found that Maycomb in the 1930s had a very broad social hierarchy. Can you explain the differences in social status in To Kill A Mockingbird, such as issues surrounding class, sex and race?
Back in the 1930s, society had a very different views and values. People were judgmental and prejudiced towards other people. Growing up in that time, I've seen all these horrifying social inequalities through my own eyes. In Maycomb, people have been living a certain way for so long, they've had it imprinted in their minds that the black community and the white community should be separated. Your abilities are based on your gender, and a man is labelled based on his ancestors and class. Everyone is affected by social prejudice in the novel. The Yules are the lowest rank of the white social hierarchy based on the way their family has been for the past generations, though some of it they have brought upon themselves. Even the wealthy and respected members of the black community are considered lower than Yules. They are treated as slaves, and most of the citizens of Maycomb are not mindful of their existence.
How do gender and race intersect in the novel? Would the novel have a different outtake on the world if Scout were a boy?
The novel would be completely different if Scout was a boy, even if it was just set from Jem's viewpoint. Females in Western society were considered weaker and not as strong, both mentally and physically. They weren't allowed to be on the jury, and it is considered disgusting to swear in front of a female. People would have treated the protagonist differently, and because of that, the views of the protagonist would have been different.
Thank you so much for talking with us today, and also thank you for writing such a wonderful story. All the best for the future.
Thank you for having me.